I received the advanced copy reader of the book You Didn't Have to by Stefanie Barnfather. I don't know the author, and this is the first book I read by Stefanie Barnfather. The book has about 260 pages with 13 short stories about alternate reality what-ifs, according to its cover.
This book reminds me of other works like The October Country by Ray Bradbury, with many short stories that mix science fiction, horror, and fantasy. Several stories in the book are related to mental, gender, and power issues. They focus more on lone characters or small groups of people. So, I think they are better at discussing those issues from an individual perspective. The stories are relatively light despite the topics covered. I think the book is more appealing to those who like a type of fiction closer to self-help, or characters to commiserate about their problems.
As a reader, I think the book is good, although not outstanding. Like easy listening music to me, usually, not the preferred type of work but that can fit well when I want something balanced. As a marketer, I have some issues with the book. Many people are great writers, but terrible marketers, including my favorite writer. I usually prefer someone like Charles M. Schulz, the creator of Peanuts, who was an amazing artist and an amazing marketer. Most artists are unlike Charles M. Schulz, and some are even proud of famous artists who never made money. I prefer to see talent recognized and rewarded.
The first problem I have with the book is its positioning. The book claims to be about dystopian societies, but I think it focuses more on individuals than on societies. For dystopian science fiction, I don't think the book adds much. And I think the stories are usually much closer to reality than to dystopian societies. The book also says it's a collection of alternate reality what-ifs, but I'm not sure why it's not only alternate realities. Many what-ifs go beyond alternate realities, from what I see. The book says it's a squeamish sequel, but I didn't consider it that squeamish, and I don't see being squeamish as an advantage for the book. The book says Japanese Daruma dolls inspired it, and I hoped I could see more of that. Especially the what-ifs. For example, what if someone paints both eyes of a Daruma instead of one eye only, as usually expected?
The second problem I have is related to the perspective I have for short stories. I remember that the writer Roger Zelazny said that many of his better short stories are just the last chapters of novels he didn't write. What he said makes a lot of sense to me for short stories and affects my preferences. Short stories are still like novels in many ways. Strong world building makes a difference, even if the author doesn't explain that. An example of that is Lord of the Rings, by Tolkien. Having a strong conclusion is still important. I think it's even more important for short stories as they are the last chapter of a novel that we don't know. However, most of the short stories of You Didn't Have to follow a different pattern. Many stories seem like one of the initial chapters of a novel. Then, they may make us curious to know more, but they don't have a satisfying conclusion. I'm okay with open-ended conclusions, but many stories didn't seem to lead to a conclusion, they just stopped. Some stories seem like the intermediate chapters of a novel when the middle of the novel is more interesting than the way it began or the way it ended.
Two stories stand out to me positively regarding that. Facing It and Scars are probably my favorite stories. The background and the characters seem better developed, with stronger details and better defined personalities than most other stories. The ends of those stories even give signals about being conclusions, saying, "Good night to you too," or a final choice made by the character, for example. The dialogue is more impactful and follows the pacing of the story better. For example, even when a character interrupts what someone else is saying, or keeps finishing the sentences of the other character, that seems to make more sense given the context instead of making the dialogue awkward. Dialogues are difficult to write. For example, small talk is an important part of engagement, as it helps people to understand each other and create the foundation for a stronger relationship. However, small talk may also seem irrelevant, and the author needs to be careful not to lose the readers. I think understanding more about small talk and related topics can help here. For example, I like the book To Sell is Human, by Daniel H. Pink, which reminds us that dialogues are a way to sell our ideas and perspectives to others, even when they are just small talk.
Finally, the book has some good ideas. But, as Neil Gaiman once told me, anyone can have good ideas if they keep thinking about that. He said that his real work is developing those ideas into success. For example, even when I liked the stories, sometimes I didn't like the book's structure. The first short story seems a weak way to start the book. The first short story is basically a cliché, which is heavily hinted at by the book description and the title of the story. I also like a short story called The Abyss, but it seems poorly located, isolated from other relevant short stories. Moving from a story based on poetry to another story based on tech support also seemed awkward to me, they seemed too distant from each other. I'd prefer to see that poetry as the last story of the book, for example, as a way to reflect and summarize what happened.
So, reading the book was a good experience, but that often left me hoping for something better. I was constantly reminded of books by other authors, as I mentioned. I ended the book thinking of reading something else by Bradbury or Zelazny, for example, instead of reading another book by the same author.